(2005) Galway, Ireland. Two boys, both around the age of 11, are playing around a site which was formerly known as the Bon Secours Mother and Baby Home. The boys come across a concrete slab and, as children do, wind up getting curious. They lift up the slab, exposing a chamber. The smiles on their faces vanish as they realize what the chamber is filled with. Skeletons, rows of them, all belonging to children. At the time, the boys could see at least 20 of them. After the boys ran home, the authorities were contacted. Soon, the chamber was explored by police where an even more disturbing discovery was made. There weren't just 20 skeletons, there were 796 of them. Not only this, but there were no burial records for any of them. How did almost 800 bodies get there? Was this the work of a prolific serial killer? The answer was much, much more haunting. Before we dive deeper, we need to go into the background of the Bon Secours Mother and Baby Home. Built in 1841, it was originally a workhouse designed to shelter about 800 people, which it did for nearly 60 years. This workhouse would allow the homeless, or those with disabilities, to stay as long as they provided free labor. The Bon Secours Sisters, Bon Secours meaning good help in French, eventually took over and made it a safe haven for orphaned children, single mothers, or unmarried pregnant women. Any woman who was unfortunate enough to give birth in the home was required to work there for exactly 1 year. They would never be paid for their work. Unfortunately, the women during this time didn't have many options as abortion was illegal, and those caught receiving one would be imprisoned for the rest of their life. Many of these women had also been disowned by their families, so they had nowhere else to turn to. By 1927, the government of Ireland had considered the mother and baby home a good solution to reducing the number of children born out of wedlock. However, in the actual home, the residents were subjected to various forms of abuse. The nuns would strike the woman without warning or reason. There was also emotional abuse. For example, babies would be separated from their mothers the second they came out the womb. The nuns would raise the babies away from their mothers, and sometimes the mothers would not even be told which baby belonged to which mother. This part strikes me as especially terrible. Hearing hundreds of infants crying and never being able to figure out which cry came from the one they gave birth to must have been extremely damaging to their mental states. It gets even worse. The babies and children would be adopted to families in other countries without the permission of the mothers. In 1952, the Domestic Adoption Legalization Act became a law in Ireland. This law restricted adoption practices to within the border of the country. Even with this, the nuns would continue their unethical practice and adopt away over 2,000 babies and children. In fact, they would go as far as to fake death certificates in order to get away with this. All of this was done in exchange for great amounts of money. How much money, you ask? The nuns were getting on average of $3,000 to $5,000 per adoption. At over 1,000 of these adoptions to the United States, this adds up to $3 to $5 million. However, this was back in the 1940s. With inflation considered, that has a value of over $70 million. At this point, one cannot consider these to be adoptions at all, rather child trafficking at its finest. Social workers, city officials, and many people in positions of power all conspired together in order to get this monstrous scheme going. Unfortunately, it is theorized that a lot of these people still work in the system to this very day. Before I go any further, I'd like to stop and give you a chance to support me and this channel by purchasing the Junkyard Kids on Amazon. Witnessing the gruesome murder of his parents and nearly becoming a victim himself leaves a boy psychologically disturbed and homeless. Along with this, He must protect his younger brother, and years later, they form a bond with other young outcasts, eventually taking refuge in an abandoned junkyard. By chance, two criminals stop by the junkyard one night, leading him to witness yet another murder. Shortly after, he kills the murderer in self-defense, and he and his junkyard friends quickly get rid of the bodies and the evidence. Unfortunately, they realize they must leave the city to avoid being caught. However, things take a different turn when they accidentally stumble on the identity of his parents' murderer, and soon they decide to track him down. But before long, they learn that the murderer not only stays one step ahead of them, but enjoys playing a game of cat and mouse with his pursuers. The story is filled with all sorts of twists and turns. I use the same writing style in the book that I use to write my scripts, so if you enjoy my videos, you'll enjoy this. Look out for the thumbnail at the end of this video if you're interested. It'll lead you to a reading of the first couple of chapters. If you enjoy the book, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Amazon. I may just feature your review in one of my videos. And now, back to the video. If the adoptions in the home weren't bad enough, the children who were sick or disabled were left to rot until they either left as a traumatized adult or were neglected until they would pass away and be left in the chamber, which was actually a septic tank. Before being left in the tank, the nuns were able to collect €1 per week from the city council for each mother or child living in the home. At today's rate, that equates to approximately €41 per person. Despite all the money flowing into the home, the facility remained in unsanitary conditions. This in turn helped spread diseases such as measles and tuberculosis. Unfortunately, this resulted in the deaths of many children and babies. Investigations found the number to be over 800 within the home's 32 years. That is an average of 25 children per year. Just for reference, the national average was 20 to 30 deaths per 1,000 births in the same time frame. Children were also suffering from great malnourishment, and so inspectors were sent to examine the home in 1940 after 40 babies and children died that year. What they found was horrifying. Babies were described as having open abscesses, bloated stomachs, and being extremely thin and weak. The facility was also heavily overcrowded. Not only this, but it was found that women who had just given birth were being sent to the Magdalene Laundries. Magdalene Laundries was an even worse institution in which these mothers would be forced to perform unpaid slave labor and undergo severe emotional, mental, and physical abuse by the staff. Instead of being able to hold their babies, which they carried lovingly for 9 months, they would instead be stripped of their children and be forced to do back-breaking labor for days on end, all while recovering from the excruciating pain of childbirth. The abuse and horror that took place within Magdalene Laundries is so great that there is too much information to include within this one video. Instead, I may save this topic for a future video. Now, with the increasing death rates within Bon Secours' mother and baby home, unsanitary conditions and neglect, it was eventually closed in 1961. What was below the facility remained unknown until the two boys discovered the tomb. It was found that many of the children could have survived had they been treated with basic hygiene. Some, including the nuns, denied that this was a mass grave from recent times. Instead, they claimed the bodies had been in the septic tank from the 1800s as a result of the Great Famine. Terry Prone, who is the head of the PR firm Carr Communications, had this to say: "If you come here, you'll find no mass grave, no evidence that children were ever so buried, and a local police force casting their eyes to the heaven and saying, yeah, a few bones were found, but this was an area where famine victims were buried." The Bon Secours Sisters also state that they are completely unaware of any mass grave. After the mother and baby home shut down, the lands were sold to real estate developers. All the land with one exception. That exception was the small plot which contained the septic tank. If that wasn't enough, consider this. The Great Famine took place between 1845 and 1849. The septic tank did not exist until 1880. After the investigative reports of the mother and baby home had been finalized, the Bon Secours Sisters eventually did release an apology. This is what they had to say. The Commission's report presents a history of our country in which many women and children were rejected, silenced, and excluded, in which they were subjected to hardship, and in which their inherent human dignity was disrespected in life and in death. A link to the full apology is available in the description. And with that, it is unfortunate when institutions which are initially designed to protect and care end up rampant with abuse or worse. The Bon Secours Mother and Baby Home is truly one of the darkest parts of Ireland's history. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. If you did, hit the like button, comment, and subscribe for more content. YouTube tends to suppress these types of videos, so don't forget to click the bell button for notifications when new videos come out. And if you would like to support myself and this channel, consider buying the full-length novel The Junkyard Kids on Amazon Kindle, available in hard print or even as an ebook to be read on your phone or tablet. If you are interested, click the thumbnail on screen to hear a sample reading of the book. Also, if you have a story you would like to see me cover, go ahead and leave a comment down below. That's all for now.